a couple of cruiserweights, James Toney and Richard Mason. Now, you've seen James Toney before many times here on ESPN. He is a former middleweight and junior middleweight champion. And there is James Toney as he enters the ring here outside of Fantasy Springs. And, Dave, he just keeps moving up in weight, doesn't he?
Al, he was up to 204 for this one, and that was above the weight for him. He said back when he was at 168, I may fight for the heavyweight title one day. He still may at this rate. He keeps on going up. Nice knockout record. Somebody who, of course, was invented with the win over Michael Nunn, had quite a string. Since the loss to Roy Jones, tough for him.
All right, now, we take a look a little bit at James Toney and what he has to offer. A young man who, even though he goes up, still shows us that he's got some skills.
Against Greg Everett here, some good one-punch power. We've seen it in some other fights against Prince Charles Williams. Quick knockout power. Very unpredictable guy.
And one thing about James Toney, he always has confidence.
A couple more rounds in a work, and see what the guy can bring to the table. Because whatever he brings to the table, I got a lot more for him, so I'm ready to go. People think that because I'm heavier, I'm slower, and that's not the case. I'm actually, I got my speed back, and I'm a lot stronger. We won't move up to heavyweight division. That's the main goal.
And there is, in fact, James Toney as he continues his way on into the ring as he gets ready for his battle with Richard Mason. And he'll go right by us here. We get a good view of James Toney as he comes in with his trainer, Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, and Stan Hoffman, and all the group.
A heavyweight indeed. Somebody who used to set marks in boxing, almost records for the amount of times he would fight. He was very active as a champion. And you see him coming up there, pounding through the ropes. You see visibly how much bigger he looks than when he was fighting Michael Nunn. Think about that.
A lot bigger. He fought Nunn at 160 pounds some years ago. And now he's a big one, as they say. And I guess the question is, what kind of conditioning does he bring with that additional weight? We saw him on our championship series against Greg Everett. He got the job done there. Tonight might be a tougher task, though, because the man he's facing, and there you look at him, Richard Mason, has been in with some tough guys, not only gone the distance, giving them some trouble.
Had some guys hurt, really in situations where he just could not get over the top and get some big wins, say against Norris. Maybe tonight he'll find the formula. If Toney is affected by coming up in weight, very big edge for Mason.
So good matches for Richard Mason against Orlin Norris and Jimmy Thunder. How will he do tonight? James Toney, Richard Mason. Let's send things up to Michael Buffer.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Fantasy Springs Casino here in Indio, California, where tonight it's Top Rank Boxing on ESPN. Brought to you in association with your undisputed, undefeated King of Beers, Budweiser. This Bud's for you. All the bouts you see tonight are sanctioned by the California State Athletic Commission. Let's get things started, ladies and gentlemen, with a 10-round bout in the cruiserweight division. When the bell rings, the man in charge of the action, your referee, John Shorey. Introducing first, fighting out of the blue corner, wearing the black trimmed with white letters, and weighing in at 195 pounds. From Cincinnati, Ohio, he brings an excellent record of 21 victories, 15 by KO, with only 4 defeats and 1 draw. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome to the ring, Richard Hardface Mason. And his opponent across the ring, fighting out of the red corner, wearing the emerald green trimmed in gold and weighing in at 200 pounds. Fighting out of Ann Arbor, Michigan, he also has an outstanding record, 49 victories, 33 by KO, with only 2 defeats and 2 draws. He has captured 3 world championships. Ladies and gentlemen, title not on the line tonight, the reigning WBU light heavyweight champion of the world, James Lights Out Toney.
Hey guys, I expect
Let's take a look at the California rules, Dave.
Okay, Al, no 3 knockdown rule here, no standing 8 count as well. The fighter can only be saved by the bell in the final round. The physician can stop the fight. 10 points to the winner of a round, 9 or less to the loser. 3 judges score the fight. The referee does not figure into it.
All right, you are armed with all the rules here in California, and that is Richard Mason, who hopes that he will be able to be armed with enough to deal with a very, very big James Toney, I guess the biggest he has ever fought at. And we are set to go here, or will be shortly, I guess.
Well, in our last fight that we had him on ESPN, James Toney was 189 back in December, and that was a high for him, so now he's 15 pounds above that.
And the limit, yeah, that's a big jump. The limit for this bout was 195. He was well over, and it cost him a few shekels, didn't it?
Half of his purse tonight.
Good left hook downstairs by Toney. This is a very small ring. This ring is just a little over 16 feet. We even measured it after a little bit earlier this evening. 16 feet 10 inches. That's small.
Well, Toney will like that then. He will not need to chase as much.
No, Richard Mason might like it because he's been in against heavyweight types. His last fight was against Jimmy Thunder, and he went 12 rounds with Thunder. Now, Thunder is a pretty big puncher and a big heavyweight.
Yeah, so Mason has to get a lot from going through there and from the Norris fight as well. These guys with basically the same knockout percentage, although, you know, with fighters moving up in different weights now, you're going to see that change. And to get back to that fine on Toney, we've been told $12,500 would be the amount of that, half his purse tonight, so very costly indeed.
We're in round 1. This one is scheduled for 10.
But when you look at James Toney coming up to heavyweight, quite different than the way Michael Spinks and Evander Holyfield worked their way up through the cruiserweight ranks and into the heavyweight category. He jumped in one fight. They took years and several fights to work their way up. Toney has been saying for years this is where he wants to be.
Yeah, it is interesting how different fighters take different paths in moving up in weight. Now, Toney is standing in there with Richard Mason early. Nobody's moving much at all. Nice right by Toney. Now, we mentioned the Jimmy Thunder fight. He outweighed Mason by about 40 pounds. And Mason went the 12 rounds with him. He said it was fairly close. He said, I can't say whether I won or not, but it was a close fight.
Mason just tried for instant gold there with the right hand. I was just about to make the point. He should try to do something early in this fight and try to set a bad tone for Toney. Make it like a Montel Griffin type of a night for him.
Toney, of course, lost to Montel Griffin. That was after he moved up in weight after losing his super middleweight title to Roy Jones Jr. So round 1, both men standing there throwing some bombs. See what happens in round 2.
How much younger do you want to look? The choice is yours. When
his punch of the first round, the right hand behind the jab by Toney, you know he'll remember that and try to go back to it. He almost put Mason down.
We head into round 2. We come to you from the Fantasy Springs Casino in Indio, California, just outside Palm Springs. It's a beautiful night. We're outdoors. And we have Richard Mason in the black trunks, and in the green it is James Toney.
And you sense this is about to open up big. These guys are starting to feel their power here.
Now, James Toney is standing in with a guy who is a very legitimate cruiserweight, maybe a smallish heavyweight. And Richard Mason's throwing some big punches. We may find out tonight a little bit whether anybody in the cruiserweight division is going to have a punch to hurt James Toney. Not that Mason is the standard by that, but, you know, he's got a good punch a little bit.
He can do well with there, and Toney with the advantage in the first round and a 3-to-1 ratio as far as jabs connected. And what we're seeing from him on the inside as he stands, he's moving his head fairly well early in the bout. He's missed some of those bombs that have come at him, and there was some pretty good defense there.
Toney working the body very well and throwing some combinations. Now, he steadfastly claims that I'm moving up in weight, but I'm not losing my hand speed. And there's been mixed results on that. Some fights we've seen it from him when he's at the higher weights, and some we haven't.
Well, nobody ever keeps their hand speed all the way, but if it can be kept to a minimum and you pick up some power in return, it's a good trade.
James Toney's always been known as a terrific defensive fighter. We've seen evidence of that early on in this bout. But those skills have not seemed as apparent as he's moved up in weight.
Yeah, if you move up a little bit too quick and maybe some of the quickness goes, some of the reaction time will go too.
But there you see the Toney defense as he slips punches. It's always been his forte. Richard Mason, by the way, a 28-year-old. Oh, there he lands a couple shots in the ropes. We mentioned a couple years ago in 1993 he went 12 with Orlin Norris, who's then the NABF Cruiserweight champion. Had Norris hurt in the 8th round, but could not finish him off. But he lost the fight.
So when he sees a guy coming up from Cruiserweight, he has to feel that he's got an advantage, that he's a little bit more in his home territory here, but Toney's going to make him find out if he's got that edge.
Well, James Toney has found a home for that right hand. And early on, you have to say the hand speed of Toney is such that it's better. And, of course, coming off a fight in which he was facing Jimmy Thunder, a big heavyweight that didn't have hand speed, you can see where Mason's got a problem. Does he have Toney hurt or not? Hard to tell. Well, we'll find out maybe in round 3. Good right by Mason. Stick with us.
Well, toward the end of the round, both guys are trading their home run shots. Toney tried to load up. Mason nails him with his best punch of the fight.
So we head into round 3, and it has been a toe-to-toe struggle. And James Toney, with a macho display at the end of the round, held his hands aloft, as almost, I thought, as if to say, hey, I'm in here against the biggest guy ever fought. I took the shots. Not bad.
And that was a key psychological moment for both guys, the end of that round. A proving ground with their strength.
This one is scheduled for 10. James Toney, of course, in the green, as you know, the former middleweight champion, won that in 1991 from Michael Nunn. Defended it 6 times. Then he won the super middleweight title and defended that 3 times before he ran into Roy Jones Jr. And now he's fighting up over 200 pounds. Good right by Toney on the inside.
And he hasn't had the same marquee fights since losing to Roy Jones. It's funny how one fight in your career can mark a turning point.
He had a bout against Montel Griffin, the former Olympian, lost in 12 for the as a light heavyweight. Lost that one, and then since then he's been trying to play catch-up. Good right to the body. See what James Toney, good left by Mason, but it doesn't impact. The body work by James Toney is very, very good in this fight. I'll tell you something. He's looking pretty good here for a guy who has gone up that high in weight.
He's getting a good chance because the style of Mason is helping that out a lot, coming right to him, and Toney can move his head to the side, get some angles, and find some punching room inside.
Of course, the question is, how long will Toney be able to keep this up? Because adding on the weight, you have to say to yourself, it could have an impact. His people steadfastly insist he trained very hard for this bout and that he is in good condition. Trained in L.A.
He's really going to be in a war for as long as this one lasts. Already more than his last fight, 2 rounds against Greg Everett. He will be finding himself in some longer fights against guys that can take a better shot. So it will be a good test to see where he is.
And we mentioned that Mason just went 12 with Jimmy Thunder, who is a heavyweight of some note, and a man who, he's a heavyweight, he's 240 pounds, so he can punch it. They're getting involved in some pretty big exchanges here in round 3. So round 3 passes into the night, and we'll see what round 4 has to offer. That is 28-year-old Richard Mason, who comes out to do battle with James Toney. Mason from Cincinnati, Ohio, who is a Fighter with a 21-4 record, 1 draw, and he has 15 KOs among those. And of course, James Toney, the former middleweight and super middleweight champion, one of the most active fighters in boxing, 49-2-2, and that's really a lot of fights for a guy to have in his mid-20s these days in boxing.
It certainly is. You get a look at his edge in the punching. Toney had 5 fights in 1992 right after winning the title. Didn't always take the big money. He went right out and fought. It was sort of a throwback to the way fighters used to be.
Well, speaking of fighting, Toney landed 2 excellent right hands, and Mason tried to flurry back but couldn't hit him. Big right hand by Mason, but Toney absorbed some of that blow by turning away, as he so often does.
Good head movement by Toney. Mason's been slapping with his shots thus far in this fight. If he could tighten them up a little bit, he could really test the chin of James Toney. He's had the chances. They're right in front of each other. Very pleasing style this has evolved into. Banger versus banger.
Now you see why Richard Mason went the distance with Jimmy Thunder, went the distance with Orla Norris. He obviously can take a punch.
Problem is, how quickly can he shift it to offense and try to win these fights?
Toney caught him coming in a little earlier in this round and added to the power of the punch. Toney is more active, Dave, I think, than we've seen him in recent fights.
He looks like he's got some pretty good balance. He's still up on his toes here, though it's relatively early. You don't see heavyweights on their toes for too much. He has a pretty good sense of banging, then getting out, then getting back inside. He's using a lot of the tricks he's learned at lighter weights up here.
A very good point. They say his future's in the cruiserweight division. He's well above that tonight, but Stan Hoffman, his manager, said that this is an interesting evening. For the folks that are into boxing, they'll know Jackie Callan, his former manager, is the manager of Bronco McCart, and he is fighting later. Jackie told us earlier today it's kind of weird to be at a fight where she's watching James Toney. This is the first time this has happened since their breakup, and she's not managing, somebody else is. But she said things are cordial enough now where they can all talk amongst themselves.
It's pretty eerie. It does tell you about an era gone by, and that was a very long era. Jackie Callan was one of the top managers in boxing and gained some distinction when she had James Toney.
And she hopes Bronco McCart will be on a little later. Her fighter will give her another championship. Right now, her former charge, James Toney, is looking pretty darn good against Richard Mason, who is trying very hard, but not quite getting it done. We will be back. Stay with us. That is James Toney, the former middleweight and super middleweight title holder, fighting tonight, actually, as a heavyweight, although it was a cruiserweight fight. He came in over the weight, got fined half his purse. But he doesn't care. He's happy about the way he's fighting. And, just call me a nut. I think somebody will find a way to make up that money that he was fined, and he's taking on Richard Mason tonight.
Yeah, you nut in his next fight, probably.
Yeah.
They'll find $12,000 or whatever more for him.
Those promoters have a way of making that money up, don't they?
Well, here you go with Toney's edge in the punches. Nice percentage for him. Consistency throughout the bout. And I wonder if he can ever get back down to cruiserweight again, especially if he looks at this performance and he's happy with it.
Well,
there's a lot of money up here, and people put ideas in your head about, you fight this guy, you get a lot of money. Where would he fight Bobby Chess, for instance?
Yeah, that's true. The only thing, of course, his only problem is a lot of heavyweights are going to be a lot bigger and punch a lot harder than Richard Mason. Toney misses and goes off in the corner to think about it for a moment and comes back. One good thing about the way James Toney is fighting, though, he is showing us more combination, more hand speeds, etc., than he has before. But Dave, if he fights this way against cruiserweights, he's going to be in good shape.
He'll be indomitable there as far as going through these guys. He'll have enough speed here. The power is always there.
Richard Mason, meanwhile, the 28-year-old from Cincinnati, who, as we said, came in here with a very legitimate shot at doing well, and in some respects he has done well. He lost in 12 to his last fight with Jimmy Thunder, big heavyweight. And other than his loss to Orla Norris, has had a nice win streak. But he has been just a little bit short, I think, in hand speed to hit Toney.
And he's also showing the first signs of fatigue here. The body shots by Toney are adding up early in this fight. He's a little bit behind in the reaction. When you see that an opponent's coming in a little bit heavier, you expect him to be slower. And Toney hasn't been that way.
if you think about it, and you pointed out, up over 200 pounds, he's fighting at 40-some-odd pounds more than he did when he won the title from Michael Nunn in 1991.
He won that title like 5 weight classes ago.
Oh, God.
25% of his body weight ago. That is really quite an astonishing thing.
Under a half minute left to go here in round 5. Al Bernstein along with Dave Bontempo. We're delighted you joined us on our championship boxing series here on ESPN. Bronco McCart later on will go for the vacant WBO junior middleweight title as he takes on Santos Cardona in what should be a very entertaining matchup. Round 5 comes to an end, so we're at the halfway point in this battle between Richard Mason and James Toney, and they exchange stares. Well, it wasn't like there wasn't enough hostility going on during the round. Just champions in the ring. We get all kinds of champions because one of the champion comedians in this, I shouldn't just say in this country because he's huge in Mexico with his own talk show. Paul Rodriguez is going to sit in with us, schmooze with us, and do some boxing. Are we lucky, guys?
I watched one of his performances for about a half an hour. I just couldn't stop laughing.
You constantly laughed.
He was there.
Did you laugh at all the right jokes? That's what I want to make sure. Otherwise, he'll be offended.
I'll have to ask Paul when he gets in here.
There'll be a quiz. Anyway, he's going to sit with us. He's a delightful man, and we're happy to have him. Who knows? This may be a start. You know, we'll constantly have a guest appearance by someone.
Yeah, he'll help us with the comedy. We'll help him with the announcing.
Yeah, well, we may be beyond help in that regard. We're in round 6. This one is scheduled for 10. James Toney in the green trunks, and Richard Mason is in the black. And James Toney has been performing extremely well, landing constantly.
He's been the bully that we've seen at lighter weight classes.
Using the jab so much more. And we're not touting Richard Mason as the greatest cruiserweight or small heavyweight that's out there. But he's a man who has gone the distance with some good people and is not that terrible a fighter. And so for James Toney to be handling him this way speaks well.
He's taken a lot of the aggressiveness away from Richard Mason. Now Toney experimenting for a second with southpaw. That's how confident he was about how this fight is going. We're not seeing Mason leading at all. He's trying to win as a counterpuncher, and Toney's getting sharper and sharper.
And that's not going to happen. Also, earlier, there's a nice uppercut. And look, there's the jab by Toney again. He is throwing combinations, putting his punches together. Earlier in the bout, Mason landed a couple of really strong right hands. It didn't have any impact on Toney.
It didn't, and then when Toney went to the body, he took a lot of the steam out of these shots by Mason here. And Mason is laboring right now. Toney is showing the right amount of offensive intensity, knows when to tie up, knows how to preserve his energy, utilize some ring savvy here, and he's got it all over Mason right now.
Mason gets in an overhand right. Been another good round for James Toney.
And that had nothing. Mason's good shot with the right hand. In the first couple of rounds, that had something, but he is slapping, and he's been into the body a lot.
Under a half minute left to go here in the 6th round. Mason's starting to get to Toney a little bit on the ropes, but what impact do those punches have? We'll see. Stay with us. Round 7 is still to come, and Richard Mason is launching a little mini comeback.
Well, no lack of effort for Mason. Tries everything. Toney blocks one, deflects one with his glove, and able to diffuse most of Mason's would-be rally there.
All right, we head into round 7. James Toney in the green trunks. In the black, it is Richard Mason. It has been an affair dominated by James Toney. Neither man has been down, but Toney has taken control mostly in this bout. Toney, the former middleweight and super middleweight title holder, of course. If you're a boxing fan, you know that.
Well, Toney with complete dominance, and that is a category he'd be very happy to be leading with here, the good percentage with the jab. That's something that lighter weight fighters usually keep with them when they come up to heavyweights.
And I'll tell you what, even if he's in cruiserweight, that's the thing that could be his ticket. You mentioned earlier that James Toney may say, well, heck, I can fight with these heavyweights. I'm going to say categorically, he would, and I'm sure you agree with this, he would be doing himself a huge disservice if he bought into that and decided he could beat heavyweights. Because I'm going to tell you, he won't beat the bigger punching heavyweights. He will not.
It's not for him. However, we do know that he's going to be hit with a lot of ideas, so it'll be very interesting to see what he gets approached with.
Yeah, we'll see. Of course, we don't want to write off Richard Mason yet in this bout, but he is taking a pounding from James Toney. And in truth, I don't think anyone objectively can say that a man that started out at 160 cannot get down to 195 to be a cruiserweight.
It's pretty hard to say that. You can't get down when you've been 35 pounds less.
You know, good right by Toney. He is setting down in his punches. But let me tell you something. This should tell him something. He's not getting Richard Mason out of there with the biggest punches that he can throw.
And he has to stop and wait at times in this fight. He's resting occasionally in here, chewing a little bit of clock like a good veteran.
With all that, it's been a superb performance by him. And against an opponent that is certainly trying. There you see Mason still throwing the left hook. Richard Mason has hardly given up in this bout. Under a minute left to go here in the 7th round. It is scheduled for 10. Double left hook by Mason, doesn't get there, and Toney comes right back with a right to the body.
And the discussion about where he'll fight really points at the dilemma that lighter heavyweights or cruiserweights have, because the cruiserweight division is not marketable. Even though you should fight down there, it's hard to make money.
And I think that's a shame, because I've always liked some of the fighters in the cruiserweight division.
Yeah, De Leon came in the beginning and dominated it when it was first instituted.
Orlin Norris, Al Cole got so much better. Anna Clay Wamba, we saw him once. He's never been seen again after he was seen on ESPN. Luckily, the same cannot be said for you and I. We'll be back for round 8. I'm warming up for Paul. As we bounce back and forth from network to network, I don't know where I am. I think I'm on ESPN, yes. And we're heading into round 8. And it is James Toney in the green and Richard Mason in the black.
Toney continues to jab and also try to lure Mason in so he can land the right hand on him. It's a good uppercut, and Mason has been fighting the stamina barrier for the last 3 rounds.
Since he lost to Roy Jones Jr., James Toney is 5-1, and his weight has gone up. It went up from 175 to 189 during the series of those fights, and now it is up over 200. So we've probably beat that horse to death, but it's an interesting topic because not too many fighters are able to do that. You know, and what are we here for if not to beat a topic to death, huh?
All the way.
Under 2 minutes left to go in round 8. There are TV critics all across America hopefully not agreeing with that point, huh? No, we hope not. Good left hand by James Toney. Richard Mason, the 28-year-old from Cincinnati, came in here with a 21-4-1 record. 15 KOs, but he has not really shown the power of those 15 KOs.
After the second round, in which he lost the power exchange with Toney, Mason has been timid as far as opening it up, generally speaking. Now, once the other guy establishes strength over you, you might see a fighter become a little wary about mixing it up, and he has been.
Double left hook there by Toney.
And he really has been tremendous to the body tonight.
It has been a bout in which Toney's hand speed and his defensive ability seem to be the main things that have frustrated Richard Mason. Good right again by Toney, and he has just enough movement to get away.
Toney exhibited a portion of all these skills in the first 3 rounds of the fight, effectively taking control and setting the tempo. Mason really hasn't been able to do anything about that.
I I put forth the theory at the time, and I subscribed to it, that right after he beat Iran Barkley when he was at 168 and in very good condition, we saw James Toney in a series of bouts in which I thought he was maybe the best pound-for-pound fighter in boxing, that side of Pernell Whitaker. And he really was, and you see remnants of that even now.
The speed inside, and when he fought Roy Jones, the two of them were considered the best pound-for-pound by all the magazines at that time.
We'll be back for round 9. Pernell, I didn't forget about you. We know you're good, too.
Well, here's a weapon in the Toney arsenal here. As he waits, Mason goes down. He fires the uppercut.
And we head into round 9. James Toney in the green and Richard Mason in the black. I'm Al Bernstein along with Dave Bontempo. We're not donning our tuxedos tonight. It's more formal here on ESPN.
And this is the way to go.
More casual on the deuce. Hey, there's the punch numbers, and boy, it shows what Toney's been up to.
And he's been consistently around the 60% mark throughout this entire bout. You know, one thing that we're talking about, which weight he'll be at, is that he'll never be able to set this type of a pace and fight how he feels like against heavyweights either. We talked about the punches he would take.
Yeah, good point.
Can't really sit down and take breaks here and there and then go outside and get it going.
Not against the real power-punching heavyweights, because one shot could spell the end of things. Mason missing with the left hook. Richard Mason, for his part, has been throwing punches all the way through, and throwing punches I think he thinks really ought to land. Now, there's a right hand that gets in. But when James Toney is right, no matter what weight he's at, he's very good at slipping punches.
A little bit of the head movement, you got a good illustration of it there. Move it a couple of inches, you can deflect the majority of the punch coming at you here. He just lost a lot of the power in his shots when Toney went to the body early in this fight.
Yeah, it's a very good point, Dave, and he really did work the body. More than halfway through round 9. There's only one more to go after this one, and it looks like it will go. There's some of that body work Dave talked about by James Toney.
This is looking like a gym session now for Toney.
That's true, and against a guy who still is trying to wing punches. There he throws a nice uppercut, Mason. And yet Toney has it so well in hand that it does look like a sparring session.
Able to move to the side, slip, really able to see everything Mason is trying to throw at him.
The hook gets in by Toney. Toney has not had to go this long since February of last year when he went 12 with Montel Griffin. Every other fight he's had has ended inside the distance, the longest going 8. Good body work again after the jab by Toney. Clubbing right hand. Mason with the hook, but it doesn't do anything to Toney. Toney kind of walks away, looks down at us, and whacks him with the left hook.
He was going to pull that move we've seen recently. Look off to the right and fire back.
The Lonnie Smith move. And I don't mean the outfielder. We will be back for round 10. Stay with us. 3 over Richard Mason. And we head into the 10th and final round.
Now you see again, Mason has been on the retreat since midway through. He comes out early here, retreats to the corner, and then has Toney come at him. And that's why you're going to see Toney dominance here.
A huge edge for James Toney. And landing 60. Oh, did Richard Mason hurt him? He pushed him back. Did he hurt him with that hook? I don't know. Toney looks over at his corner as if to say no. It's hard to tell.
Mason acted as if he did. And he's winging now.
That right hand missed big, as did the left hook. If I'm not mistaken, James Toney's only been down once in his career against Roy Jones Jr. It's the only time I remember. I have to confess I'm going by memory on that. And that wasn't a knockdown in which he was hurt badly.
He has a tremendous chin, something that, yeah, you look at all of his offense, it's an easy thing to forget about.
Nice combo. Blood coming from the nose of Richard Mason. I'll tell you what, I know that this Richard Mason, oh, there's Toney slipping. I know Richard Mason is not a contender, but he is not a bum by any stretch of the imagination. And James Toney's performing very, very well tonight.
He really has made Mason miss a lot, had him out of position. throwing just enough quickness at him at times, just enough power, different looks. Now he's throwing a lot more jabs in this round.
And I'll tell you what James Toney's doing to Mason is far superior to what Jimmy Thunder or Orla Norris did in their victories over Mason. So if you want comparisons, he has done much better against Mason.
He has done all the little things, just enough offense. And you do get the feeling that he can win a lot of fights this way.
Blood spattering here at ringside, and our soon-to-be co-announcer with us, Paul Rodriguez, covering himself from blood. That's something you can help him with because you've been at this game so long, and so have I. We can help him with that.
That's right. Not wearing white to the fight is a good start.
Yes. Darn it, we always have to wear these white shirts. Under a minute left to go. And James Toney, the former middleweight and super middleweight champ, carving out what has been a very, very good win for him over Richard Mason. Mason has made him work tonight.
It would have been interesting to see what would have happened had Toney gambled and gone for a knockout here.
Yeah, it's a good point. I don't know if he's capable of it because this guy is not getting knocked out by people, but who knows? So there's only 10 seconds remaining, and Mason still trying. Give Richard Mason a lot of credit. Blood on the nose. He's been battered over 9.5 rounds. He is still throwing punches to try and win. James Toney kind of grudging in his respect. He's a surly character in the ring, James Toney. He really is. And Mason and that's about as friendly and sportsmanlike as he gets at the end.
And it takes 10 rounds to get that.
Yeah.
Don't even try that halfway through a fight.
No. So Richard Mason goes 10 tough rounds with this man, James Toney. And now let's follow him over. Let's see. I think we're going to get there's a pat on the back. All right. Now, by now, James has said, yes, I respect you. Test. Very good win for that man, James Toney. There's Stan Hoffman, his manager now, his former manager, Jackie Cowan, sitting in the audience. She will have her charge Bronco McCart fighting for the WBO junior middleweight title shortly. So now there's James Toney. We assume he's going to be fighting cruiserweights in the future. I think that probably is where they'll try and get him, maybe for a cruiserweight title.
That's where he would be good. He would only have to drop 9 pounds in future fights. That can be done, and it certainly wouldn't take much out of him.
So the cruiserweights champions out there, and James Toney would like to send a message to them that he's on the way. For Richard Mason there, of course, a tough evening. There are the numbers. Really, 60%, very impressive.
And that was that way throughout the entire fight. We didn't see 80% rounds and 20% rounds. He was consistent throughout the entire bout, showing that Toney really knew how to figure this one out.
All right, Michael Buffer in the center of the ring. Let's go to him.
Ladies and gentlemen, we go to the scorecards. Lou Filippo scores about 99-91. Robert Byrd scores at 99-91. And Dennis Millsap scores it 97-93 for the winner by unanimous decision, James. Lights out.
And so James Toney gets a unanimous and well-deserved victory. And if you're a cruiserweight out there, look out, he's coming. And if he fights like he did tonight, he's going to make some noise in that division. So we are going to be ready shortly for our main event. Bronco McCart and Santos Cardona for the WBO junior middleweight title. We'll be back. Stay with us.